Okay.
Enough wiggle room. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to our first segment of True Crime Storytime with Rick.
Hello. Glad to be here.
In this segment, I will be telling my fiance a true crime story that he has not heard of yet. Then we'll discuss it.
And I may or may not lose faith in all of humanity by the time the story is over.
In today's True Crime Storytime, I will be discussing the disappearance of Skylar Neese. Trigger warning, we will be discussing a real story that affected the lives of real people and a tragic death that was caused by a heinous act. If you're not able to handle a true crime story at this time, please check out one of my other lighthearted videos, like this one. We mean no disrespect to the victims of the story. We ask that you please be kind in the comment section. Thank you. Skylar Neese was a strong-spirited 16-year-old girl who was an honor roll student at University High School in Star City, West Virginia. She was the only child of her doting parents, David and Mary Neese. Skylar's father, David, knocked on Skylar's bedroom door on the morning of July 6, 2012, to inform her that he was going to let her borrow his car if she dropped him off at work at the local Walmart. He was surprised to not receive a response, as she would have perked up to the suggestion. As David walked around the outside of the house looking for his daughter, he quickly discovered a vanity chair just outside of Skylar's bedroom window, and that the window was open by a couple of inches, indicating that Skylar had snuck out of the house at some point with the intention of returning.
Rebellious teenager?
Yeah. He called his wife, Skylar's mother, Mary, who calmed him down by stating that she will reappear soon. Skylar had snuck out of the house before, but overall, she was a responsible teenager. A few hours later, Skylar's father called the local fast food restaurant Wendy's, where Skylar had worked part-time, and discovered that she had not shown up to work for her shift that day. This was unlike Skylar, and her parents decided to call the police and report their daughter as missing. Although the police had come to the Neese's apartment located in Star City, Virginia, an Amber Alert was not issued in Skylar's disappearance because the circumstances did not meet all four of the criteria for an alert to be issued. 1, a child is believed to be abducted. 2, the child is under the age of 18. 3, the child may be in danger of death or serious injury. 4, there is sufficient information to indicate that the Amber Alert would be helpful. A waiting period of 48 hours had to elapse before a teenager could be considered missing. Therefore, Skylar was initially considered by law enforcement authorities to be a runaway. Authorities interviewed Skylar's closest friends, who initially said that they didn't know anything, but then one of her two best friends, Sheila, eventually admitted that she had picked up Skylar in her car at around 11 p.m. the night before with their best friend, Rachel. They took a joyride around town for about 45 minutes and then dropped her off 4 blocks away at Skylar's request so that they wouldn't wake her parents.
Yeah.
Authorities then checked the surveillance video at the Neese's apartment complex and found footage of Skylar walking away from her bedroom window at 11:30 a.m. and getting into the backseat of a car. The video was in black and white and quite grainy. Therefore, they couldn't make out the color, make, or model of the car. One thing that was certain from this footage was that there was no sign of struggle and that Skylar entered the vehicle willingly. Questions began to fill the minds of investigators. If her friends dropped her off earlier, who else was Skylar meeting up with at 12:30 a.m.? Her parents tried to keep their hopes up that she would return home soon, but with this discovery, they couldn't help but fear the worst. Could the person picking her up be a predator that she had met online? Dun, dun, dun.
And this was 2012, right?
2012. Days went by with no sign of Skylar, and the case of her disappearance began to go cold. Everybody in Star City and surrounding communities passed out missing persons flyers, and her best friend Sheila in particular became very involved in the investigation. At one point, she stopped by the Neese's house and asked if she could spend some time in Skylar's room. Mary Neese allowed her to do so, then found her sitting on Skylar's bed, holding her pillow and crying. Although Mary was hurting because her daughter was missing, she consoled Sheila. A few months later, another young girl from a few counties over also went missing, which caused for the Federal Bureau of Investigation to want to take a look into Skylar's case. Now, with the help of the FBI, Star City Police was able to determine that the unidentified vehicle in the surveillance footage was a silver sedan. This is when investigators began to take a closer look at Sheila Eddy, Skylar's 16-year-old best friend, who said that she had picked her up at around 11 p.m. because she drove a silver Toyota Camry.
Oh.
And there was no footage of Skylar leaving her home prior to 12:30 a.m. It was then determined that Skylar's two best friends were lying and perhaps hiding something. A couple of days later, the girl who had gone missing from the neighboring county was safely found, but there was no sign of Skylar.
I have a question though. It took the FBI for them to figure out that it was a silver sedan. Didn't they have the video footage the whole time?
They had it, but it was very grainy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I saw the video footage actually of Skylar, and it was hard to see. Police read Skylar's journal and social media accounts and discovered that the teenage girl had a very toxic relationship with her best friends. She would cryptically tweet about how she would tell the entire school their secrets if she had to.
High school. Ugh.
Upon interviewing her fellow classmates, authorities discovered that the trio had been dwindling down to a duo as Sheila and Rachel had began publicly complaining about Skylar, saying things in class like, "I can't stand her. I honestly wouldn't mind if she died." It was obvious from Skylar's Twitter account that she was angry and feeling left out. In her journal, she privately wrote about one night when Sheila and Rachel had intimate relations with each other in front of Skylar and how uncomfortable it made her feel. It had become obvious that these two girls were fed up with Skylar and they felt that they couldn't simply stop being friends with her. Otherwise, she would spill the beans about all of their secrets. That's Frida. Investigators decided that Sheila and Rachel knew more than the information had been providing. So they set up these girls to take a polygraph test. They assumed that perhaps Skylar had died of an overdose and the girls had hid her body. Sheila failed the polygraph test twice.
Oof.
Meanwhile, Rachel never took her polygraph test because while on her way to the police station, Rachel jumped out of her mother's car and ran to Sheila's house.
Oh.
Police knew that Rachel was the weaker link of the two and started putting pressure on her.
Yeah, I mean that's a show of guilt right there. Nobody innocent does.
Yeah, like
nobody's gonna throw
runs
themselves
out,
from a car.
jumps out of a moving car.
Yeah, it's not like the movies.
In
Unless
desperation.
you know what you're doing, you're gonna break something.
No. 6 months after Skylar's disappearance, with the mounting pressure of classmates and police, Rachel snapped. Her mother called 911 from their home and stated that her daughter had been having a mental breakdown, as you can hear Rachel screaming in the background. She was then taken to a mental institution. Once she had calmed down, she was released, and she told her mother that she wanted to talk to the police. As detectives sat down with her at the station, she began talking, and the very first thing that she said was, "We stabbed her."
Wow.
Authorities were shocked by this admission. This was not the confession that they had been expecting. They had expected that the girls knew more details than they had been letting on, but that these two teenagers were the sole culprits of a murder. Rachel then explained how Sheila and her had been planning on killing Skylar for months. She admitted how they had thought of different ways of doing it and ultimately decided that using knives would be the easiest way since there were already knives right inside of their kitchen. Rachel then confessed how the whole thing went down. They lured Skylar to sneak out of her house late at night to go for a joyride and smoke green stuff. They drove about 30 miles just past state lines into Pennsylvania, where they all got out of the car in front of a wooded area. When they went into the woods, Sheila said that she had forgotten her lighter. As Skylar turned around to walk back to the car to get her lighter, Sheila counted to 3, and the 2 girls took out the knives that were in their pockets and began stabbing Skylar repeatedly. Rachel stated that at one point, Skylar had fought back and managed to get a hold of Rachel's knife and cut her. She showed the police the scar on her leg.
It's a scar? How long after?
6 months.
Oh, 6 months, wow.
Yeah. Rachel said that Skylar's last words were, "Why?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What could have been so bad? High school, everything feels like the end of the world.
Yeah.
So.
And then she kept asking the same question over and over again.
That's so sad.
Afterwards, the girls went back to the car and changed their clothes to clean clothes that they had put into the trunk of the car. And they took out shovels and tried to bury Skylar. But they couldn't because the ground was too hard. So they just covered her body with leaves and branches instead, and then head off and continued living their regular lives. When authorities asked Rachel why they killed Skylar, she replied, "We didn't like her. We didn't want to be friends with her anymore." Like, that was their reason.
I mean,
we didn't want to be friends with her anymore.
Yeah, that's a bit excessive. But you hear all these high school student kinds of stories, like the movie Bully, which is based on a true story, and you hear local stories like that all the time.
Like Columbine. I always thought to myself, with the whole Columbine thing, they were just a few days away from graduating.
Well, right. So, like, what month did this happen? Like, they were going to school literally
in July,
right after.
So it was
summer vacation.
It was summer vacation.
So they had some time to settle down from the crazy scenario and then go back to school. They went back to school.
Yeah, they were sophomores going into their junior year.
That's crazy.
She then led authorities to where they had left Skylar's body. But by this time of the year, it had been filled with snow and ice. Authorities knew that they wouldn't be able to find her until winter was over. They didn't arrest Rachel yet because her confession was so unbelievable to them. People have made false confessions in the past. They needed proof. 4 months later, police went back to the scene and found Skylar's remains.
I guess consistent with Rachel's story.
Yeah. Skylar's parents were told of the news of the finding of Skylar's body, and they were able to finally put their daughter's body to rest. Police had been surveilling Sheila during those months and gathered up more evidence by tapping into phone calls between her and Rachel and searching in her car. During this time, Sheila posted some now infamous tweets, such as the sadistically cryptic tweet, "We really did go on 3." She was talking about how they counted to 3 and then began stabbing her.
That's kind of what I thought. But
her tweets during this time were
right. That's it's like an extra level of sadism to do the cryptic tweet. It's not normal. Well, none of it's normal, but you can have that crime of passion and then tons of guilt. Doesn't seem like this person has tons of guilt. This person's tweeting. She had
none.
About almost proud of it in a way, which is weird.
The difference between Sheila and Rachel was like night and day.
And it makes me feel like Sheila might be like this alpha female that influenced Rachel so much and was like the terrible bully female leader of the group.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I'm profiling her in my head.
Authorities worked out a deal with Rachel for confessing to the murder and leading them to Skylar's body. She turned herself in and pleaded guilty to second-degree murder at the court. Before the news broke out, police finally made the arrest at a local Cracker Barrel restaurant where Sheila was having lunch with her mother. At first, she pled not guilty. But then when her attorneys saw the amount of evidence that the prosecutor had against her, she changed her plea to guilty. In the end, Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder on May 1st, 2013, and was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 10 years. Sheila pled guilty to first-degree murder on January 24, 2014, and was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 15 years.
What?
Because they were 16.
I don't care.
Hmm.
Life.
Yeah.
Life for both. For me, it's Sheila's obviously a step above Rachel. So in this life, I think, you can't be a Sheila. You can't, blatantly take somebody's life because you don't like them. And then also, you can't influence the mind of Rachel. But as Rachel, you have a responsibility, I think, to not be influenced by people like that.
Yes.
And, this life, you get one shot. In my mind, I would only be one shot and one and done.
Yeah.
Life in jail, capital punishment, whichever.
The police at one point had like a conference. A speaker came in and was talking about psychopathy. So they were talking about the traits of someone who is a psychopath and someone who is a sociopath. And when they were discussing the person who was a psychopath, those two investigators looked at each other and they said, Sheila.
Wow.
Sheila fits everything here.
Yeah, like a little mini Charles Manson type. She's...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she took part in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, she's the mastermind and a first person, like, she partook in.
Yeah. This concludes the story of the solved disappearance of Skylar Neese. The aftermath. A West Virginia state legislator from the Neese family home district introduced a bill called Skylar's Law to modify West Virginia's Amber Alert plan to issue immediate public announcements when any child is reported missing and in danger, regardless of whether the child is believed to be kidnapped.
That should just be like federalized. Like, why not just put that nationwide?
Since Skylar's Law, other states started implementing the same thing. So it is having a domino effect throughout the country.
Well, yeah, especially children. I mean, it's a bit different than an adult. They're 16 years old. So
this is a condensed version of the story that I got from a book called Pretty Little Killers by Daleen Berry and Jeffrey C. Fuller. If any of you want to know all of the details of this case, please check out their book. It's a page turner.
So, how much did Sheila's mother know when her daughter was getting arrested at this Cracker Barrel?
Well, the investigators called Sheila's mother to see where they were at first. Because
did she know at this time that they were onto her daughter?
Yes, because they had taken her daughter's car already. And crazy.
Right. They searched the car.
That's right. So what's crazy about it is that when they took Sheila's car, Sheila started blasting on Twitter saying like, worst day ever, and like all this stuff on Twitter that she was just so inconvenienced. Yeah. She was so inconvenienced that these cops came over to investigate her, that they took her car away.
Well, so also I think it's harder for teenagers, I think, to really understand how they should try and fake their emotions to the police when they've done something so stupid like this. Obviously, that's a huge sign, a huge red flag if she's acting like this when her friend was murdered. Yeah. Oh, you're going to take my car. It's like you're the last person who saw her. You picked her up at 11:30 p.m., correct? Mm-hmm. Right? Or 12:30 a.m., I forget. But, you picked her up. She's in your vehicle. You should be willingly giving your vehicle to police. Mm-hmm. You have parents, too, so they probably have a car that they can take you to and from school. So it's like it shouldn't be that major of an inconvenience to a 16-year-old. I mean, I can understand maybe it's the only car in the household, but even then, your friend was murdered. You're not showing emotion. You're showing the emotion, oh, my car was taken. But I think, they're too dumb. She's 16 and too dumb to realize, oh, I should actually be faking, like, sure, take my car. I want to help as much as I can. But no, she was thankfully, too dumb to even do that.
Yeah. But it just shows how there was no remorse at all.
Yeah, obviously. Well, they've both sent pretty bad tweets out afterwards, didn't they? Mm-hmm. Or was it just Sheila?
It was Sheila.
Oh, okay.
It was Sheila. Rachel stayed below the
Well,
surface
she
for the
seemed
most
like
part.
she felt guilty and maybe didn't even want to go through with it. Perhaps I don't know the full extent, but she seems like in some way was pressured by Sheila. So I'm not saying it's better. I would give to me. I don't care. I don't care if you're pressured by somebody else. It's life for me. That's it. You have to be smart and respectful and hold yourself to a high standard in this life. If you screw up somebody else's life, that's the end of it for me. Goodbye. Jail forever. The other thing I was trying to think of was how close were Sheila and Rachel and Skylar's parents? Were they friends too?
Skylar's parents knew Sheila's parents from high school.
Oh, they went to high school together.
Mm-hmm.
That's mental.
Yeah.
That's a oof. A lot can be said about that. I'm just churning in my head now of all the unfortunate, disgusting drama that must have ensued.
I want to mention again about the book because as we're talking, I just want to discuss so many more details that were in this book, but I don't want to make this video super long. I listened to the audiobook again because I read the book years ago and this case just always stuck with me. And so I listened to the audiobook again to prepare for this so that I can write the script. And it's 9 hours long if you listen to it from cover to cover. But there's just so many details in there. So I do recommend this book. If you find this case interesting, check out Pretty Little Killers. I definitely recommend that book.
I also think that 6 months went by before they really looked at the friends too hard. I don't know how much was really done to look at the friends, but with how not smart Sheila was after the whole thing, I feel like the local police could have perhaps dug deeper. I don't know the full story, but I feel like perhaps they could have looked at them a little harder.
Well, yeah. And
I'm
my
glad
whole
that the
thing
FBI
is,
finally stepped in, but
and on top of, like, Rachel was there confessing and they were still not like slinging cuffs on her.
right.
Like they still let it go for 4 months. She actually visited her grandmother because her parents had known at this point that she had confessed to murder. And they knew that they were just waiting for more evidence, aka Skylar's body. So her parents made the decision of, for the weekend, go visit your grandma. We're going to take you to your grandma's because
not
then
me. I'd be like, keep my child in the cell, please.
Yeah,
I don't want them in my house.
that way she was able to spend some time with her grandmother because they knew that she was going to end up going to prison at some point. So her parents knew. Jeez. And the cops are just like, and I'm like, when does this ever happen? Like, you never hear about this.
What state was this again?
West Virginia.
West Virginia, and then they drove into Pennsylvania?
Yeah, they drove into Pennsylvania. Yeah. So they drove over state lines. Well, this concludes our story. Please let us know if you want to hear any more true crime stories. I know that this channel right now is kind of all over the place. I have makeup tutorials. We have other things. We did move Tea Time Terror to another channel. So Tea Time Terror is its own entity right now. Subscribe to that so you can see some more TTT because we've got more coming.
Thank you, everyone. I've been fully shocked.
So you, the horror buff, how do you feel about listening to true crime stories?
Well, especially when it's like children, I think that it's much worse. It's a true story, that makes it so much worse. I find true crime to be way more horrific because it's real. Just the things that people were willing to do to each other. And in this case, they're supposed to be best friends. This is like a mega betrayal. It's just disheartening. People don't treat each other very well. The horror I can compartmentalize because it's fake. It's not real. It's just an interesting, suspenseful story. But, this story actually happened. Yeah. So, and it's just sad. And unfortunately, there's dozens or hundreds of stories just like this. But in the end, it's real human suffering. So it's scary. It's scarier, I think, than a horror movie. Yeah.
And yet, I can read books on it. I can listen to podcasts all day long
When you
on it.
compartmentalize it better.
Yeah, and then last night he was watching Halloween, and I was in the bedroom sleeping, and he's in the living room watching Halloween, and all I hear is ding, 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 and I was freaking out.
It's October almost, so
Yeah.
we're getting the marathons
It's
in.
spooky season. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. Please be kind to each other. Bye. That's it. That's the one.